Hello and welcome to the 40th video of the Project Sovereign series. In this video, I'll show you how I created the interiors for the ship. This is one of the more fun details to make, so let's get started. Now it's time to create the ship's interiors, and what I'm doing is I'm building really simplified versions of those interiors because they're going to be textures in illuminated boxes that are going to create the illusion of real interiors in the ship. The ship is far too large to build actual 3D interiors for, so I'm just going to settle for flat textures projected onto a 3D box and illuminated from within, and it creates a pretty decent looking illusion from far enough away from the ship. So I've created two types of interiors. I've created this living space, which I gleaned from screenshots of the movie, most notably Picard's quarters. And you'll notice that there's a replicator, a little bookshelf, and there's also this furniture here, like this bed and desk and table and this chair, which I'm actually going to import into the ship scene and use in the actual ship model just to give it a bit more oomph and to sell the illusion a bit better. So there's this, and there's a couple of what I call work interiors. So just some conduits, some consoles with actual LCARs on them, and doors and just panels and stuff like that. And again, just like with the crew quarters, I created this table and this kind of cylindrical console and more consoles and a work chair, again, to be imported into the main scene. So basically the idea here is I rendered out these textures like this. Oh, and you're probably wondering what this guy is doing here. This is the biped rig that comes with Max. I just use him to size the different furniture, especially chairs. It just helps to make it all to scale. So what I did was I rendered out each one of these scenes, and what I did was, you might be tempted to do this in orthographic because everything's nice and flat, but what I did was I did it in perspective, so it gives it a bit more 3D push. Again, a really subtle effect, but I think it's really helpful. So I rendered out these textures, and these textures are going to be illuminated, and then I can use those textures in my actual ship scene. So here I am back in the ship scene, and as you can see, I have imported all of my furniture, and I've also created the materials for the rooms themselves, and you'll see that I've done something here. I've created a couple materials for each of the textures. There's this one, which uses the texture that I rendered out for the diffuse color and the self-illumination color, so it's going to glow as if it's being lit by a real light source. And also I've created one that isn't glowing at all, and you're probably wondering what the deal is with that, but I'm going to show you later on in this video. So this is for the living quarters, and I've also created them for the different workrooms that I created. So the textures are all done, the furniture is imported, and I can give you a demonstration as to exactly how I build these rooms. So what I want to do is I want to build a box, and I want to make sure it's 2 meters tall, because that's what I imagine the deck height is on the Enterprise. And I want to align it. I'm going to build this room right here. So it's going to wireframe. That looks like a pretty good height for it right there with the windows. And I'll give it the proper amount of segments. So what I want to do now is convert this into an editable poly. And I want to delete the face that's going to be facing the windows. And I want to select the rest of the polygons and flip their normals, so now it's inside out, and all the normals are facing on the inside, which is exactly what we want. The next thing I want to do is I want to create ceiling lighting. Very simple, but this also enhances the room box as well. So I'm just going to connect these, and I'll give it 2 segments, and hit OK. Now I want to chamfer them, and let's see what a good thickness would be. 0.25 meters, I think, is going to be fine. So while I'm here, I'm going to apply a lighting material that I created, and I'll show you that. So here is the interior lighting that I'm going to be using. It's just an illumination material that will emit light, obviously, and I will assign that to selection. And this is going to be a work room. It's not going to be the living quarters. It's going to be a work room. In fact, most of the lighting on the ship is going to be that because that's the way it is in the movie, that sort of blue room lighting. So I'm going to select these, and I'm going to use just a basic floor material, which is right here, this blue material. Nothing special about it. And I'm going to assign it to that selection. So you can see there. Lastly, what I want to do is apply the actual room material. So I'll just apply this. This will be this room right here. Like so. Now to work on this, I'm going to be in my render engine so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. And I want to apply a UVW map. And I want to make it a box map, so it's going to apply it on all three sides of the room. And you can see it's working right here. So basically what I want to do now is I want to just scale it. I'm not going to get too carried away with this, just so it looks okay. This is actually pretty good looking the way that it is. And on the side, this could be stretched out a bit more. So I just want to be sure I'm in Gizmo for UVW map and slide it out. There we go. So that kind of gives, you can see that's giving the illusion already of a real room. So now what I need to do is I need to fit it to the actual ship. So for that, I'm just going to drag it. Just like that. And just kind of move it in place. This is actually a bit big, so what I can do is just go to Editable Poly, and I can just modify the vertices to fit better. And the great thing about this is I'm not going to distort the texture because I still have my UVW map. There we go. That should do nicely. Just drag it until this top part starts to disappear. Now I can drag this floor out like that. So we're almost there. This is going to poke out a little bit. I'm just going to move these so they're just behind the hull. And I want to give it a look around just to make sure that I can't see any of the actual like interior of the ship. Only the room. So that's looking good. That's looking good. That's looking good. And here's what it looks like in the render engine. So you see when we fly by, I don't know if you can see that, we get that really cool perspective effect, right? And then what I can do is simply drag some of my work furniture in there. So I'm going to make a copy of this. And I want this to be an instance, just in case I make any changes to it. I don't need to change each and every single one that I make. Also, this is easier for 3ds Max to handle as opposed to a bunch of unique copies. So just instance. And I'm just going to drag this where it needs to be. There we go. Just bring it into the room. Don't really care about room layout or anything like that. This is just for show. So there we go. A little desk and my little chair. I can just align that like so. Position it properly, not on the table. There we go. So now we fly by. You see we get that multi-dimensional. So it really starts to look like a real interior, just so long as you don't get too close to the ship. But again, this isn't a really made for close-ups. It's a replica of the studio model. So you see we'll get that nice perspective shift. So it's just going to be a matter of duplicating these and creating them all around the ship. The ship has many windows, have not bothered to count them, but it's a lot. So I'm going to do that now, and when you see me again, all of the interiors will be magically finished. That was a lot of work, but I finally did it. Each one of these windows has its own interior. So I'll just give you a good look around the ship from afar. And then we could take a close look at some of the more interesting points. So you can see on the secondary hull, there are windows with interiors. On the back of the neck, there are windows with interiors. The entire command tower, and of course the entire saucer section, they all have windows. And I can show you this in wireframe mode too, just so you can see, right, all of these boxes that I built. It's just a matter of putting your head down, listening to some music, listening to some podcasts, and just getting it done, but it's done. So I can show you, there are some specialized rooms as well that I created. So this, I always thought of as the Arboretum, and I think that's a pretty popular view held in fandom. So I created a little woodland scene here, complete with 3ds Max trees. Very low poly count. I have much nicer trees that I use for architectural rendering, but this ship is its own scene. This is a really minor detail, so I use the very lightweight 3ds Max trees, and it just created a texture of a woodland scene to create the illusion of an actual arboretum in the ship. I also created this command tower for the main shuttle bay, and you can see it has a lot of the furniture in here. This room needed a lot of attention because it's so large. I just didn't want it to be an empty box, so there's a lot of the furniture here. There's a lot of consoles in here. Gives it a nice three-dimensional look. And I created the conference lounge that is featured a lot in the movie. And I was a bit torn on this because the interior of this is that living quarters that I showed you before with the red carpeting and the tan walls, but the exteriors, it looks blue. So I settled for using the blue textures, but I created this conference table you can see of wood and all of my little desk chairs around it. So this creates a nice three-dimensional effect too when the ship flies by. I think it's going to look really nice. And also what I wanted to show was, if you remember earlier in the video, I created that room that wasn't lit. So what's the deal with that? I will show you. So here's a good example. I created this room that's illuminated, but on the ship, some of the lights are off, right? Some of the rooms are empty. But instead of doing what I usually do, just creating a black glass texture to cover it up, I created a room without any lighting going on. And you can see in the render that there's detail showing through this. So this gives it a much more realistic and much more interesting look, I think, in that it's a room with its lights off as opposed to a room that's just has black glass over it. So this is going to really help sell the scale of the ship. I think scale is really important in modeling. This is a gigantic ship, much larger than the original Enterprise. And I want to help sell that size, and this is a really good way to do that by creating these interiors that are going to change perspective as the ship flies by. If you look inside, you can see all kinds of LCARS consoles and lights and things like that. So now the ship is all lit up. So now that all of the interiors are finished and I've created my texture studio, it's time to buckle down and create the actual textures. So the next video in the Project Sovereign series is going to be creating a texture. I just want you to see how I do it. It's going to be a lot of work and it's going to be very rote. And a lot of the textures are going to be created the same procedure-wise. So I'm not going to show videos of each texture being created because I don't think that'd be very interesting. But the next video you see in this series will be me creating a texture. So I hope you enjoyed seeing me create the interior window boxes. Adds a lot of life and interest to the ship. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you soon.